Hi there. What encouraged me to make this video was hearing the countless stories of people suffering long-term in the aftermath of COVID. I'm chronically ill, I have been for some time, and I have a theory about how it's manifesting that may make a significant difference in healing. I encourage you to watch this whole thing and to take the information to make the best informed decisions for your personal health. First of all, I know what it's like to have lived normally and then have your health ripped away from you. I know what it feels like to watch everyone else you know go on and live their lives while you're stuck in your body that seems to be triggered by anything, by nothing, and you can't figure it out. I understand what it feels like to see every medical specialist and have no answers, or if you do get answers, there's really nothing you can do, no cure, covering up symptoms while the disease worsens. Most or all tests come back negative. You start to feel crazy, then hopeless, and some people don't believe you or think you're exaggerating. Or your symptoms are up and down. So one minute you feel decent and can function, there's a glimmer of your old self there, and then another minute is agony. I get it. I know what it's like to feel like you have good friends, and then since people no longer understand you, the relationship changes. You're kind of left behind. I know what it's like to live this way, but have to carry on with your responsibilities. I understand the gravity of all of this and how scary it is. So just know that you're not alone. You have a community here and support. So this is my best effort to give you as much information as possible so that you can make informed decisions about your health and the steps that you can take to potentially reverse some or all of the lingering symptoms that plague you. Nothing is a quick fix. If somebody tells you it is, then they're not telling the truth. It's not real. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and change, is real. It's a process both in learning and physically rehabilitating, but to potentially have our lives back, it's worth it. I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor or a medical professional, but it's my theory that there's a connection between neuroplasticity and the aftermath of COVID. I am not suggesting that this is a cure or treatment for COVID, the virus itself. I'm leaving that to the experts, as everybody else should. If you have COVID, seek proper medical attention with a qualified physician or professional. That is not this video. This video is referring to the aftermath, or long COVID as people are calling it, the lingering symptoms that manifest in people after they've recovered from the virus itself. I'm specifically talking about the chronic illnesses that people are developing, such as fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, food and histamine intolerances, mast cell activation, and many others. This is not referring to things such as lung damage or something that needs immediate medical attention or is an emergency. Always seek proper medical care for any and all symptoms, even the ones discussed in this video. This and the others on this page and connected videos are not meant to treat or cure any illness. It's for information purposes only, so that you can make informed personal decisions that may help you and the qualified medical professionals that you are working with make the best and safest decisions for your health. Everyone has different underlying health conditions, so no information presented here is meant to be standard across the board. Make safe and healthy decisions with a qualified medical professional. One reason I have the theory that I do is if you check out some of my personal story videos, you'll learn that I was starting to lessen some of my chronic illness symptoms before COVID. And after that hit, I completely relapsed in every sense of the word. But the key that gives me and should give you some hope is that I was making improvements in chronic illnesses that are very much like the ones that people seem to be developing after COVID. I've witnessed others, real people, make full recoveries from chronic illnesses by rewiring the neurons in their brains, specifically their limbic systems, and the connection to their nervous systems that it has. Mine, like many others is fragile, and stress whatsoever has caused me to relapse in my illnesses. But other stories are comforting in the idea that one day you may be able to be that best version of yourself again if you take all of this information to heart. I'll start explaining my theory very simply. Think about how we learn anything in general. Our brains take in information from our senses and make a neural connection. It's a pathway. The more we practice what we're learning by studying, physically doing it, the better we get at it. That's because the neural connections become stronger with practice. The way our brain works is to create strong pathways. Our brains don't change by deleting, but rather by creating. That's how we learn anything at all. So if we're talking about a chronic illness, what happens in many of them is these pathways are created after a trauma. A trauma can be anything. It can be physical, like a virus, or something emotional. And the brain remembers the reactions connected with it, which manifest as our symptoms. Chronic illnesses are really just made up of symptoms, and they're given a name for the illness. Anytime it's triggered by whatever that is, the connection becomes stronger in the brain. It's learning. Just like we're learning another language and the neurons fire, connect, and become stronger, it's learning the reactions in chronic illness. So the reason illnesses progress is because the brain gets better and faster as the neural connections become stronger. If we take something like fibromyalgia, for instance, listen to anyone's story who has this illness. Usually they say that it started kind of small, aggravating symptoms, and years later, sometimes people are in excruciating pain. This is where the limbic system comes in. The limbic system in our brain is basically the emotional system. It takes in data from all of our senses and our environment, and it connects all of that to our emotional reactions. This tells our nervous system how to act in response, and then it saves that memory of that entire loop. It's called the limbic system trauma loop, the way it wires and saves the emotional connections into memories. That's why so many of us who are chronically ill see symptoms from seemingly different systems in our bodies all start to progress at the same time, not necessarily at the same rate. So for me, in 2010, I was exposed to toxic mold in my home. At the same time, I had a very stressful job working 16-hour days in a hostile environment. I started getting some symptoms: heart palpitations, fainting, itchy ears, headaches, a chronic cough, but all the symptoms were bearable enough, and I had a life still. Fast forward some years later, my symptoms were worse. I had a major emotional trauma, abuse, still living in the moldy house, and I started getting more symptoms: vertigo, hypotension, migraines, food intolerances, and it was only some foods at that point. Now, today, it's progressed to eating in general. I can barely eat food at all. How did I have all of these diseases at once? Heart conditions, neurological symptoms, GI issues, food, histamine allergies. It's all connected to one source. That initial toxic mold trauma set me up in the limbic system trauma loop in my brain. Think about it. Our nervous systems control so many automatic functions in our bodies. Things like our blood vessels contracting when they're supposed to. That's just one example. If that's not working properly, it could potentially affect anything from blood pressure to pain in our heads, swelling in our feet, all different symptoms or diseases. But it's from that one source. Well, it's interesting then. So I was personally given the diagnosis of hypotension and migraines. So, I'm going to all these different specialists: a neurologist for my migraines, a cardiologist for the heart things, all these different specialists for all these other symptoms and diseases I had. And they're all categorized as these unique diseases and symptoms. Well, now it's been 10 years for me. Chronic stress from having these diseases progress has contributed to the trauma loop even more, and therefore my health has rapidly declined. The thing is, my story is not unique. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is that I honestly believe that after contracting COVID, many people's limbic and nervous systems were triggered into a similar trauma loop, much like mine and so many others with chronic illness. This has happened before. It's not new information. It's just a new virus, and it's severe enough that what has happened to some of us is happening in mass now. It's my theory that long COVID is mostly the acquired symptoms and diseases in the aftermath of the virus that manifest differently in different people depending on our genetics, our health history, environmental factors, and whatever else is in our lives. Logically, what's more likely? All of a sudden, thousands of people randomly have fibromyalgia, food and histamine intolerance, chemical sensitivity, heart issue, mast cell disorder, chronic fatigue syndrome? Or was this severe virus the trigger that set off this fight or flight, which is also part of the limbic system, remembered this learned information and trauma in the form of our neurons, and set off the limbic system, nervous system trauma loop, turning into these lingering illnesses and symptoms? People have ended up with these chronic illnesses since forever after contracting viruses, going through abuse, car accidents, or any other physical or mental trauma. So why would it be any different after COVID, especially something so severe and deadly? It's a major trauma on our bodies. And on top of the physical trauma, think about all the emotions everybody's been going through. Our lives have been turned upside down. That's a trauma. Our brains function by remembering. It's how we are able to do anything at all. It makes scientific sense that the same thing would happen to trigger these illnesses and symptoms. I can't promise you anything, but in my next video, I will outline some of the rehabs that have been successful in treating people with all of these other chronic illnesses that have manifested for different reasons in the past. They're strikingly similar to long COVID or many of the aftermath symptoms that people are experiencing. In the meantime, check out the description drop down in this video. There are resources where you can read about the science of neuroplasticity and rehab programs people go through to heal chronic illnesses in general. Take a look at my other videos on this channel that not only explain neuroplasticity, but are methods used in many of the rehab programs, such as visualization meditation. So for example, the reasoning behind visualization meditation is that this specific type of meditation uses your senses, strong emotions, to rewire your relationship with certain triggers. It can help calm your nervous system and create new pathways that take over old, damaged ones. Remember, I talked about before, the limbic system is the emotional brain center that uses sensory information and remembers it. So you're giving it new memories with new emotions attached using a technique like this. I'll explain that in detail later, another time, but for now, I hope that this gives you some hope that you're not imagining this and that there is a science behind it that potentially really makes sense. We don't know everything about COVID yet. The scientists don't know everything about it yet. You know, we don't know things like if the virus is staying in people's bodies or whatever. But we at least know how it's manifesting in certain people and how it's so similar to things in the past. So if people have been able to heal from chronic illnesses that seem very similar to the aftermath, that gives me some hope. And I think my theory has a lot of ground to stand on when you think about it scientifically like that. You have support here, and I hope that it gives you some hope. One last important thing. As I stated before, this isn't the answer to everything post-COVID. People have physical damage to parts of their bodies and may have also developed or exacerbated other underlying illnesses. We don't know everything. But 3 noteworthy issues that some scientists and doctors are analyzing right now are genetics, mast cell activation syndrome, and vagus nerve damage. I'll link resources for each in the description. Long story short, from what I understand in terms of genetics is that research in epigenetics has found that there can be changes in gene expression. So basically, some of our genes can be turned on or off. It's possible that a percentage of the population had certain genes turned on when it was triggered, such as those who seem to be suffering from mast cell. Additionally, the vagus nerve is worth mentioning because it interfaces with parasympathetic control of the heart, lungs, and the digestive tract. Many people are experiencing symptoms related to those areas in the body, so it's worth looking into. As you use the links in this video, consider how you are personally feeling and if anything you read matches up closely with your experience. It may give you some critical guidance for your health.